Appreciate everyone being here today, and it's really a great honor for me to have Sergio Ermotti here. We have no greater friend than UBS and Sergio Ermotti. I mean, Sergio is really one of the great CEOs of the world and has been an enormous friend of the American Swiss Foundation. So Sergio, we're going to have a little fireside chat here. We don't have a fire, but we can certainly have a chat. And I wanted to just from my own standpoint, about say maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I was down in Washington, D.C., and my family had been going skiing in Deer Valley for years. And Sergio looked at me and said, "Why are you going skiing in Deer Valley? You should come to Switzerland." And we had this big discussion about where to go. And he recommended we go to Zermatt. You may remember this conversation, it was at the embassy. So we go to Zermatt, and we get a ski instructor. The ski instructor was a banker from Lugano. I mean, how could you make that up? Because you're from Lugano. So Sergio, maybe a few questions just to give people a little bit of background. You always wanted to be a football player, isn't that, or a soccer player for the Americans, is that right?
Yeah, well, until 21 when I realized that I wasn't good enough. So I guess, and then of course I focused on something else.
Well, that's how it was about my golf game. I thought I'd be a pro golfer, and I now became a lawyer. And you started out in banking as an apprentice when you were 15 years old. Tell us a little bit about being an apprentice.
Well, back then, of course, I took the apprenticeship as a way to get to do some things. I wanted to be a professional football player. So. But I had to learn some things, to do some things. My plan B was to be a sport teacher. If it wouldn't work with football, I would want to be a sport teacher. And then after 6 months in the bank, I realized, well, my plan B is now being a trader.
Because you love trading.
Yeah. So and then being an apprentice was all about. Learning very fast what it means for a young person to be part of the adult world. You would not, the difference between having your parents, your family, professors at school, it was a completely different relationship. You were basically catapulted into, the real world. So it was great because I could learn and work. Going to school, basically 2 days a week, 3 days working, between 15 and 18. And I think it's a great way to get exposure to, a profession or a job, and while still having options open to do something else in your life if you want to do so.
The U.S. has a big unemployment problem, particularly among the youth, and Switzerland is known for having the world's best apprenticeship programs. Tell us a little bit about why the Swiss apprenticeship model is so successful.
Well, first of all, because I guess we are not forcing per se people to go to university even if they are not skilled, or particularly if they are not still clear on what they want to do in their life. And the second reason is that, well, by the way, when you go through an apprenticeship, right, you can still go back into academics. So I think that's very important, that to give the optionality to young people to really test, and mature, because when I was 15, I was not really mature, right? So I was very, I didn't know, really what to do. Many young people still are undecided, and that's a great way for learning something's different and keeping open the optionality. But the secret of the Swiss success, like in Germany and Austria partially, is that it's a federal model. You have a federal standards on what it means being a banking professional or a plumber or whatever. In every profession, an IT specialist. For each profession, you can go through an apprenticeship that gives you the fundamental skill set necessary to be a successful, person, and then opening up the options eventually to, go through post graduate and develop further. But it's very important for this certification to be a national certification that is recognized all over the country. So it's not subject to the employer that, but it's rather a certified model. And that's the reason why in the US you are not successful, is because you are not embracing the concept that this has to be a federal recognized model. If you let corporates having their own programs, when a professional moves from one to the other, it's not clear that the standards will be the same.
Oh. You started off as a trader, and I've often found that a lot of former athletes are great traders. What did you love about being a trader?
Well, first of all, when I joined the bank, I thought that I would go through 3 years of fairly boring life in terms of having to go stay in an office all day long and doing things that were not particularly interesting. But what I felt it was, in the middle of the trading department in securities and FX was a very hectic environment.
A lot of excitement.
Live, and the most important issue was to see how anything that would happen in the world from a political standpoint of view, geopolitical, economics, would influence, the market and create, opportunities.
What do you think makes a great trader?
Is connecting your guts with the brain very rapidly.
How did you move from becoming an apprentice to becoming CEO of one of the world's biggest banks? Tell us a little bit about sort of how it all happened. You must have had, you made good decisions on the trading floor, I would imagine.
Well, first of all, I never thought when I started to be, that one day I would be the CEO of UBS, for sure. I mean, I don't think it's a realistic...
And UBS was a lot smaller then when you started.
Yeah, but still then, I have to say that, I remember when I was young, if anything, I had an admiration for the person that was running the central bank, because I could see how his words would influence markets. So I was fascinated by the fact that this guy can say something and market moves. So it was very, but no, I think that, honestly, I think that, my career was based on having passion for what I was doing and, having, following through with perseverance on what I was doing and luck and courage. So the but the most important issue was always passion for the job I was doing without necessarily, expecting the next job.
Not having a plan.
No, look, I think that, I don't think it's realistic. I mean, I'm not saying that it's wrong, but I don't think it's realistic for people to start their career with a conviction that they want to be CEO. Maybe it's a dream, but you should never allow your life to be influenced by those kind of issues. So if you love what you do, you should be happy. And eventually, if you are successful, it's okay.
Now, you first became the CEO of UBS in a pretty dark period, right in the middle of the financial crisis. And you've been widely credited for turning around the bank. I mean, there was a period when people thought UBS might go under even. It was pretty shaky. How did you turn UBS around the first time?
Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, I was named CEO of UBS after the bank was stabilized after the financial crisis. So but still, the jury was out in respect of the sustainability of the business model. And very simply, I really focused on what, the strengths of the bank and say, look, we should try to focus on what we are good at and what we are leader at. We were back then already
wealth management.
A preeminent wealth management franchise globally. We were still already the leading bank in Switzerland, not really clearly yet, but eventually with a chance to become the leading bank in Switzerland. So I say those should be the two areas where we focus at. And also working on capital allocation, because when I took over, 60% of the capital of the bank was allocated to the investment bank. But the investment bank was only contributing to at best, to 20% of the profits, at best, but very volatile. So basically shifted the capital allocation the other way around, capping the investment bank at a third, still allowing the investment bank, which is critical to our success, to focus on its own areas of excellence, right? And so reshifting the capital allocation, the focus on what we wanted to be was over time eventually the success.
And you're currently trying
and the consistency in doing that, right? Without
over probably what, 7 or 8 years you had to
exactly.
be the CEO.
So that was.
Now you're currently executing one of the biggest bank mergers in history, and I bet did you ever think you'd be doing a merger of UBS and Credit Suisse?
No, because after I left in 2020, I didn't think I would be back and doing that job. I was very humbled that they asked me to come back to do that. But if you ask me if I ever thought that it would happen, the answer would be yes. But I never thought that I would be the one executing that.
Do you see more integration or consolidation among banks in Europe over the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I've been talking about this topic, and in my point of view, it's inevitable that it will happen. It's necessary. It's no way Europe can compete globally. I don't think that Europe can mobilize the right financial resources to sustain its economy without having strong and sustainable banks. In Europe, the banking system has been de facto destroyed after the financial crisis. It's exactly the opposite of what happened in the US, happened in Europe. It was a policy decision to de facto make banks smaller to the extent that are not relevant any longer in many aspects of the competitive landscape, and therefore allowing combinations that can create value not only for shareholders but also for the economy, for clients. It's essential in my point of view.
Well, the Treasury Secretary in the U.S., Hank Paulson, during the financial crisis was a banker, so he kind of understood what was necessary to basically turn the industry around.
Yeah, I mean, look, and if you think about in Europe is even more important, because in the US, the economy is de facto funded 70% through capital markets. We are at New York Stock Exchange here, through equities, bonds, in any shape or form. And 30% is the banking system. And still, you see the importance of having large banks in the US. In Europe, it's the other way around. 70% of the economy is funded by the banking system. So you can imagine that if you don't have critical mass and capabilities, it's exponentially even more difficult so it's really an industrial policy logic that is missing in the European construct.
So UBS is obviously critical to the future of the European economy. Where do you stand on the integration between Credit Suisse and UBS?
I think that we are approaching halfway. I think that when I look at, the most demanding part of the equation was in the first 3 to 6 months to stabilize clients, employees, and the system, right? So that, and the second one was, to go through the merger, the legal merger of the two banks. It took 80 approvals by regulators in 40 countries. 40 countries, 80 regulators giving 180 approvals. It's a very complex.
Good for the lawyers, fortunately.
Yeah, for you guys did a lot of work. But all that was has been done by the end of June, early part of July. Now we are going through the most important phase. The second most important critical phase is migrating clients from the IT platform of Credit Suisse into the UBS platform. It's going to take 5 quarters or so. It's very complex, but you know, I think that I'm very pleased with the way we are progressing. You know, everything, you know, we have to, you know, reduce cost by 13 billions. Half of it has been achieved. Another half has to be done.
What are some of the bigger remaining challenges you face?
Well, I'm confident we're going to execute, but we cannot be complacent. Migrating 1.1 million clients from one IT platform to another one is a big task, and so we have a lot of respect for that.
There was a time when Credit Suisse was one of the leading banks in the world. I can remember back when I was in college, you know, the great jobs were Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Credit Suisse. And I think there was even a time when Credit Suisse was viewed as even ahead of UBS. You know, what lessons can we draw from the downfall of Credit Suisse?
Yeah, it's like in many things in life and business that you can't be complacent about having success and history repeating itself. You know, you need to work hard, particularly when you are doing well, to be quite humbled and respectful of you know, what it takes to get there. You know it takes long. You know, all of us knows here how long it takes to achieve some things. It takes a nanosecond to destroy everything. So, in that sense, you know, striving for excellence and always try to improve is the way to stay up and not repeat the mistakes of many banks, but not only banks. I mean, honestly, big businesses, right?
Yeah. Now, UBS is now really the only big global Swiss bank. How has the size of UBS affected your relationship with our friends at FINMA and the other the Swiss National Bank?
Let's say that is probably the most problematic part of the acquisition. So the problem is that you have to understand that for Switzerland, what happened with Credit Suisse was a shock. I mean, the founder of Credit Suisse was a pioneer, a legend in Switzerland, because he is the one that not only founded Credit Suisse, he founded Swiss Re. He is the one that had the vision that we needed a transportation system in Switzerland.
Was this just so people?
Alfred Escher.
Yeah.
And he's the one that de facto funded the tunnel under the Gotthard or under the Alps, right? Founded the ETH, the Polytechnic in Zurich. So the fact that Credit Suisse disappeared in such a tragic way was a shock. So, and then of course, you know, let me say that a lot of mistakes have been done by the bank over the years, by the board, by the management, by shareholders that allowed certain things to happen. But also some of the supervisory functions didn't work well and actually even facilitated certain aspect of this bad business model. And so now the fantastic outcome of this failure of Credit Suisse is that if you go around and you ask any of the stakeholders I just mentioned, who do you think should be responsible for that? None. So the bank went down and nobody is responsible. So, and you can see how now people are trying to pretend that it's lack of regulation that led, you know, created that issue, rather than the fact that the current regulation was not implemented or followed in a proper way. So that is creating a lot of tensions in respect of what we believe has to be done.
Well, we did the same thing in the United States after Enron failed. We had Sarbanes-Oxley and all it did was basically make money for accounting firms. And then we have Dodd-Frank came after the financial crisis, and sometimes it's really the laws exist. It's just a matter of getting the right people to execute.
Yeah, but that's normal. And I have to say that what happened post the financial crisis was necessary, even though maybe we didn't like it, but you know, the banking system and banks abused the freedom and the more open, you know, the system back then, and things had to be brought back into a better framework, like the one that has developed over post the financial crisis. And you look at what happened in 2023, and over the last 10 years, big banks who are now regulated in a better way were safe haven in crisis, and not the one creating problem. Credit Suisse was the exception, and the exception was created by the fact that they had an idiosyncratic business model issue and the lack of implementation in the regulation. And so in a sense, I'm saying that regulation works. Every time you go through a crisis, you need to improve how things are done, but we should not allow a crisis to throw away things that work only to hide self-interest. And that's the real issue that we are.
Now, the U.S. remains, if not the biggest, one of the most important markets for UBS going forward. What are your ambitions in the United States?
Well, I think that, you know, we see still the U.S. and Asia as the two major engines of growth for wealth management and wealth creation. You know, and in the U.S. we have an opportunity to leverage better. You know, we manage $2 trillion of clients' assets here. So we employ 21,000 people. We are in almost 300 countries. There's 300 cities in the country. So, but you know, if I look at our products and capabilities, we can do better, and we can do better with what we do today. But we also can, continue to grow together with the growth of the country. So, in a sense, if you look at who we are, de facto, we are a Swiss-based bank, but you're our second home in terms of people employed, size of the business. 40% of our revenues are U.S., coming from the U.S., right? So it's a big chunk of our business. So we are, it's our second home is the U.S., and we continue to grow here.
UBS is one of the world's biggest, if not the biggest, wealth managers. What challenges and opportunities do you see in the wealth management business over the next decade?
Well, first of all, I think that the secular trend that supports wealth creation, as I said, here in this country and in Asia is still there. Demographic trends in the world are supporting the need of people to save money and invest money for retirements. We're going to have 83 trillion of wealth that will be transferred in the next 20, 25 years to the next generations. And we have been able to bank with 3 or 4 generations. We have 160 years of doing wealth management businesses. So for us, it's very important to be prepared to manage this transition, help people to plan for it, help people to think about how they want to pursue their philanthropic goals with the financial capabilities that we can offer, investing in the right way, dispose their businesses, transfer their businesses. So it's plenty of opportunities from a secular standpoint of view to continue to believe in wealth management. So,
where do you see the areas and the opportunities for growth for UBS over the next decade?
Is the one I mentioned. So the US and Asia are the areas where we're going to see more growth. I don't say that in Europe we won't see growth, but it's more a function of market share gain than underlying economies. Unfortunately, Europe is not doing well, is not likely to change in the foreseeable future.
Do you think that's a function of the political situation in Europe?
Well, yes, the lack of coherent approaches to not only the economy, also geopolitical topics, and it's a long story, but it's an unfortunate story. But so you see, basically, Europe is relying too much on the social system, and the demography is very bad. But and still, people are against immigration. The productivity is going down, so I think there is a challenge.
Now, with war in the Ukraine and the Middle East, very polarizing U.S. presidential election, coming up in the next 6 weeks, we obviously have challenging times. What's your outlook for the global economy over the next year or two? Soft landing, hard landing, growth?
Well, soft landing is what everybody wants to hear, and I think I'm positively surprised that central banks in general have managed to, basically deflate the economy without going to a recession or a deep recession. So I think, for the time being,
hard to believe the head of the Fed is a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah, so I have to say that I'm still a little bit more skeptical about the market expectations of so many rate cuts. So because I still see an inflation of 2.5%, core inflation at 2.5% in the US as being, a little bit too high to predict too quick cuts.
The trader in you is worried.
So, but it's too much consensus. And actually what's going on today in financial markets, in the economy, is that you see all these movements of money going from one side to the other very rapidly, creating a lot of volatility. So, there is too much consensus that we're going to go through a soft landing, which I hope for, but we should not really totally rely on for the time being. But the truth of the matter is that one has to look at, in a positive way, what can be done in the next 10 to 20 years to transform our economies, utilizing new technology.
Are you a big believer in AI?
I am, but I don't know.
It could affect the banking business, I would think, right?
Every business, not only the banking business, is going to affect your business.
Oh, we're worried about it. We think about it, but we think we'll be a little ahead of the curve, hopefully.
Really?
Our view is that AI will hurt commoditized lawyers, but not hopefully what we are.
But I fully
and make us more efficient.
More efficient, and one of the topics that we are facing is that. Not in every country in the world, of course, we have different dynamics, but in the Western countries, we are facing demographic issues in terms of labor force availability. If we don't enhance productivity through new technologies, we have a problem, right? And therefore, embracing technology to create more efficient and effective way to create a product, serve clients, is a must. Now, people are fearing that, and my view is always that, first of all, it's not going to be a big bang kind of event. It's going to take time to. And if I look at our natural attrition rates in the bank, if we just simply say that we're going to replace only a third or 40% of the people that leaves because of retirement or voluntary, as a function of improving productivity, it's not even going to be a social issue. Actually, you can manage it over the years in a way that allows you to achieve a win-win situation, right? So I think without that, the risk is too high that you're going to be irrelevant. So you asked me before what I think that the lessons learned when you are successful. The lessons learned is to be paranoid about failing. You need to be paranoid.
I agree 100%.
If you are not paranoid, you are not.
We're always worried. This is probably the most important question, and people will start taking notes, but I wanted to just ask this for the audience. So what advice is UBS providing to its clients about investment opportunities and risks right now. So what should everybody be doing with the money that we have? Investing with UBS.
Each people here have different risk appetite, life expectancy, and spending habits. It's very difficult to say one thing for everybody. So really, the most important issue is always to understand what are the needs. But if I want to be very general, I have to say that nowadays, try to really detach investments from thinking about your long-term goal and balancing maybe the asset allocation in a way that is, first of all, diversification, not only in terms of asset classes, but also in terms of duration, and be a little bit courageous in maybe taking liquidity risk for higher returns in certain asset classes. But it depends how much money you have and exactly how much you need.
Are you a big believer in the continued growth of private equity, for example?
I think I expect, I'm not so sure it's going to grow as fast as it's been growing in the last
10 years.
10 years, but still, people are now looking more into the private credit part of the equation, which is an interesting proposition, but going back to banking, it's a reflection of intentional or non-intentional policy making that is driving business away from a regulated, transparent market into a non-regulated, less transparent market. So non-banking financial institutions, which includes, of course, insurance company and asset management, but also, more private funds, have higher degree of flexibility. There is an element of regulatory arbitrage, but there is no free lunches.
Greater risk for investors.
Yeah, but there is no free lunches.
Yeah,
so there is high risk, less transparency, there is a liquidity issue. So people have to fully understand what's going on. But I'm not against private credit. I'm not against private markets. But right now it's probably a little bit over, heated segment, right?
Now you're running a bank with more than 115,000 people, 52 countries. What are some of the lessons in leadership that you've learned through the years?
Well, has nothing to do with 115,000 people, because I think my lessons is applicable to if you run 5 people team or 50 people or 500, is that, as I mentioned before, you need to show passions for what you do and lead by example. So never ask your team to do things that you're not prepared to do yourself. So it's very important for people to understand that one. So I would say that's the most important issue.
Showing passion.
Passion, well, of course you need, of course you need to be skilled. You can't be a leader if people don't think that you know what you're doing, right? But eventually, without passion, without focus on continuing to improve, and I do think leadership means also having the courage to take decisions. So
making the hard decisions.
And without waiting for 100% information. So at the end of the day, that's coming back from the trading days, right? So it's no way you can wait for 100% information. You need to.
The good trade will be gone.
You need to jump a little bit ahead, and eventually the ability to recognize mistakes very quickly is the things that makes the difference. Which is not human. For humans, it's not very easy to. Machines can probably do it better, right?
That's probably right. You once wrote an article about Switzerland being even more important to the United States than China. Why do you think Switzerland is so important to the United States?
Yeah, but that one was a provocation I made, because I think that's.
But for a small country with 7-8 million people,
yeah, but it was a provocation.
It's a pretty important country to the United States.
Yeah, but back then, Ed was in Switzerland as an ambassador, so yeah, Switzerland, we have foreign investments into the US. We are number 6.
That's correct.
So I think China is not much, right, it's not far away from that.
Not too far from that, no.
Not too far from that.
Canada,
but if you think about the kind of people Swiss corporates employs in the US, I think if I remember correctly, average wages is 100,000 plus.
No question. What do you think makes Switzerland such a successful country and punches above its weight? Now, we always hear, Switzerland's the most happy country in the world, but economically, it's obviously punches way above its weight compared to virtually any country in the world.
Well, it's a mix of political stability. I mean, if you look at, in a sense, we have a permanent coalition government. So, I mean, there is no, and
everyone has to get along.
yeah, and the political system is meant to be more of managing the country rather than having too much ideology around how to. So liberal. Over time, I mean, now, unfortunately, we have a direct democracy system where you can call for referendums or launch initiatives that has been very helpful for civil society to react to any political nonsense, right? Now is, unfortunately, a system that is abused by political parties to profile themselves. But eventually that was helping always the country to stay down, stable to what matters. So hardworking, high level of education. So we mentioned the apprenticeship, but we also have top universities that ranks very high in the global league.
Multiple cultures.
Multiple cultures. So we speak, I mean, I'm from, as you can hear, from the south of Switzerland, 400,000 people, right? Out of 8.5 million.
Where there actually are palm trees.
Population, right? So, so we really have a mix, a federal model like the US. That's the reason we have sister
republics,
which is what Europe would need to be successful. Recognizing what needs to be centralized and what needs to be delegated to each country. So it's a good mix of, it's a small version of the US, I would say.
And I think also having sort of an alpine culture, being very innovative and sort of persevering.
Yeah, I mean, but hardworking population, I'm not so sure that results would repeat itself, but it must have been 15, 20 years ago that the Swiss population turned down a vote on which people were asked, do you want to have a week more vacation? I don't think in any other country.
All right, one more question for me, and then maybe we'll ask a couple more. The Young Leaders Conference is the signature program of the American Swiss Foundation. UBS has been a sponsor of it. We really appreciate it. What have been some of the keys to your success? What can you sort of tell our young leaders? Like, how did you become Sergio Ermotti, CEO of UBS?
I have to repeat myself. So I mean, it's nothing really magic. I think that, of course, I must have had some skills, right? So some
good parents.
But at the end of the day, it's the passion for what you do, working hard, and I was lucky, but I was probably able also to recognize those moments and having the courage to take advantage of that situation. So I think that is a mix of everything. So I think, but the most important one is passion for what you do.